Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Remembering Dynasty with Peter Golenbock.
Welcome to the very first edition of Remembering Dynasty with Peter Golenbock. I'm Ralph Tyko. My co-host is the man himself, Mr. Peter Golenbock. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you. Just fine, Ralph.
All right. I'm delighted that you decided to pursue this with me, and in the interest of our having fun. And so let me start with when it wasn't fun. And I want to take us from the time when you and I were both 10 years old. We are the original baby boomers, born in 1946. Am I right?
He's home run.
Right. Okay.
Oh no!
But
No,
it was 40. It was 57 when they left. We were about to turn 11, and both National League teams left, and it left a hole in New York. And I want to talk today about what brought us as a society from that point to the point where, when you and I were talking off the air, I told you I went to Newtown High School. And I had to clarify, it wasn't the Newtown in Connecticut that is so prominent in the news. And you brought to my attention something that was absolutely chilling. And why don't you explain society as it's come to be through the eyes of your brother, who was Peter?
Well, Newtown was where that crazy guy with a gun went into that school for little kids and shot up the place.
And that was Newtown, Connecticut, not where I went to school, right?
Yeah, that's right. That was Newtown.
We had the crazy teachers that at Newtown High School in Elmhurst, but that's a different story. Yeah, right. But this was really
my brother Robert. Yeah, my brother Robert, who is a pediatrician. Most of those kids who were murdered were my brother's patients.
Right.
So it was
absolutely chilling. It was
just horrifying. And what is even more horrifying is since then we have done nothing, and I mean nothing, to curb the gun violence in this country. It's just terrible.
Absolutely. These politicians are indebted to NRA with their money and their votes and their PACs and their craziness, and it goes
people
on.
Still vote
and
that's the part that I don't understand, especially here in the South. I'm from Florida.
Right.
And the NRA owns the entire state legislature. They pay these people hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And it's clearly out in the open, and Florida isn't the worst of the states. In Georgia, you could take a gun into a bar. You could take a gun into church, and it's...
They are about to pass a ruling in Florida where people can carry their guns into the classrooms. And I'm a professor at USF, and the professors are starting to talk that if they allow such a thing, I think the professors are all going to go on strike.
Wow. Now you talk about students, or students can carry a gun into
anybody. So that would be students. Yes, students. I suppose I could do it myself if I wanted to. I could walk into my classroom with a holstered gun if I wanted to. If this
insane.
law passes. It is. It's utter insanity.
And I even, in my own ideology, say, give in to the gun-toting folks. You can have a gun. You could hunt, register it, take classes, do this. You don't need a magazine. Where is it? Is there any use for a magazine to be out there? For what use? Hunting, it makes it inhumane. Self-defense, do you really need to shoot somebody 12 times? It's crazy.
And yet nobody in the Florida legislature, which is Republican-dominated, will bring up a bill that will ban submachine guns and guns like that. They just won't do it.
And the Republican hero Ronald Reagan himself said he sees no reason why a private citizen needs an automatic weapon. He himself said that.
They quote Reagan when it seems to suit their needs, but when it doesn't suit their needs, they don't. So
exactly. And scarily enough, Reagan is to the left of a lot of these people, and I thought at the time it couldn't have gotten any worse than Reagan, and then the Bushes and with the Rumsfelds and the Cheneys, and it is absolutely crazy. I hate to take joy out of someone's.
You want to talk politics? The one thing that happened yesterday is perhaps the one thing that may stop this march of madness, and that's death of the Supreme Court justice.
I was just going to say I hate to take pleasure in the passing of a human being, but for the sake of humanity, this is a good one. I mean, it's not like it's Ann Coulter. But
no, this
pretty big.
This is somebody with real power to do real damage. And quite frankly, in the last 20 years, nobody, and I mean nobody, has done more damage to this country, and this includes President Bush, than this fellow.
Yeah.
I mean, his Citizens United, his all of his rulings against Planned Parenthood. They're trying to kill the
I've
union.
been remiss. Excuse me one second, Peter. I'd like to introduce my co-host on another podcast that I do. It's called New York Baseball, Past, Present, and Future. His name is Wayne Unger, and that was the voice you heard interjecting that question about Reagan. Welcome to these microphones, Wayne. You've been in the Comfortably Zone Network for a long time now. How you doing, Wayne?
I'm doing fine. Hello, gentlemen. Carry on.
All right. Okay. We're both new.
This has nothing to do with the Brooklyn Dodgers. This has nothing to do with the Brooklyn Dodgers, of course.
No, actually, you could go Yankees, you could go Dodgers, you could go Mets. This show is Golenbock. What were you growing up? Were you a Giant fan, Yankee fan? Yankee fan, I'm guessing, but
I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay.
And my first great memories were of the years 1955, 1956, 1957, 1958, which were all Yankee pennants. Somehow they didn't win in 59. Never could stand that. Then the Yankees, of course, won in 60 and 61 and 62 and 63 and 64. So if you were growing up in the vicinity of New York City and you were rooting for anybody but the New York Yankees, you had to be out of your mind.
Well, I was a Giant fan. Wayne was a Yankee fan. I was a New York Giant fan from those days. After 54, it was just Yankees and Dodgers. Yankees and Dodgers. Sure. There were some. The 59 year you talk about was very interesting because I don't think the Yankees finished second to the White Sox. I think Cleveland might have finished. Right, Cleveland might have finished second. And that
but the real sin there in 1959 was that the World Series opponent for the White Sox was the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Right. What a
which could not have been an easy thing for all those Brooklyn Dodgers fans.
No, and it wasn't for. Yet it was. There were some Brooklyn Dodger fans that remained Los Angeles Dodger fans. Some Brooklyn Dodger fans that hated baseball. So, I mean, everybody reacted differently to the shock of losing either your favorite team or the team you love to root against, or both. And
well, the smart thing that baseball. I'm saying the smart thing that baseball did in 1962, they brought the Mets into existence. So all those Dodgers and all those Giant fans could have a National League team to root for.
It was wonderful. It wasn't the same. I've been a Met fan for all these many years, ups and downs, over and outs, but there was nothing like the Giant-Dodger rivalry, just like there's nothing like the Red Sox-Yankee rivalry. And so when it was taken away from you and 3 teams it became 1 team, did it affect you at all, or did you miss National League Baseball personally?
Well, I used to watch the games on the TV. The
right.
Giants games I used to watch on the TV. I used to watch the Dodgers games on the TV. When I went to the stadium, when I went to the ballpark, I went to Yankee Stadium. That's where I went.
Okay.
I never ever went to Ebbets Field, which was a shame. I'm sorry that I didn't. I went to the Polo Grounds for the first 3 years of the existence of the Mets, so I did have the opportunity at least to watch ball at the Polo Grounds before they moved to Shea Stadium and they tore the Polo Grounds down.
Right.
And I was just the opposite.
I had the opportunity.
And you see, and I was just the opposite. I was a Yankee fan growing up in Jackson Heights, but I used to go to Shea Stadium all the time because, it was so close. But had the Dodgers not moved, I probably would have been a Dodger fan because my mother's family grew up in Brooklyn, and they were all big Dodger fans. I remember my Uncle Phil became a Met fan, and he was more like a grandfather than an uncle. And I'll never forget when Yogi Berra became the manager of the Mets. He was not happy about it. And then when the Mets went to the World Series in '73, he was actually upset about it because he said, "Oh, now they're going to keep this guy another couple of years." He just could never get over. I guess he held the Mets in the same place in his heart as he held the Dodgers, and having Yogi Berra, I guess it would be like Yogi Berra for him playing for the Dodgers.
Wayne, it might have been. Let me interject something. They named Yogi Berra manager of the Mets at Gil Hodges' funeral. At the funeral itself, they announced it. They figured the press was all there anyway, and I thought it was the lowest class thing that any baseball organization ever did. And I would venture to say that was probably what was in the back of your uncle's mind if he grew up as a Dodger fan. At least it might have been.
Yeah, but understand something. They were looking at this. Yogi was the coach. He was the Mets coach for Gil.
Right.
And they were looking at this as Mets. They weren't looking at this as Dodgers or Giants. They were looking at it as Mets. So I guarantee you.
But it was the announcement itself. It was the announcement, the timing of the announcement that probably stuck in the man's in the back of his head. I don't know if you remember it at the time. It was just like people were in shock. Gil had died, and at the funeral they announced Yogi. Anyway, it could have been a number of things, but they were the Mets, and they were cosmopolitan. I mean, the
Metropolitan.
KC Metropolitan, if you will. Yes, they had Metro. You're absolutely right. They had Casey as the manager, and former Dodgers all the way through when they first came into existence. Guys that were clearly over the hill early on.
It was one of the worst baseball teams you can imagine. The
right.
National League was so awful in what it did is that if you had a team of, say, 25 players, it allowed them to protect, say, 22 of them, so that only the very worst players were eligible to be drafted by the Mets and the Houston Colt 45.
And some of them had played
it was awful.
Key roles. Guys like Felix Mantilla had played key roles on good
Red
ball clubs. The Braves.
10 years ago.
That.
I mean, these guys were all in their mid-30s, for crying out loud. Believe me, these were the dregs of the ball players who were left over.
Yes.
Guys way over
yes,
the hill.
Yes, it was. I remember it well. And
they could get people like Duke Snyder. Later, they got Willie Mays. Hodges was a Met for a little while. Don Zimmer was a Met for a little while. They were able to get a handful of these very much over-the-hill ball players from the Dodgers and the Giants. And that's part of what kept the interest for this new, really awful team. And, of course, the person who really, really made it interesting, despite the fact that it was an abysmal ball club, was Casey Stengel, who was one of the most entertaining, wonderful managers of all time. Now,
it also helped. It also helped that the Dodgers and the Giants were in the National League, because if you remember back then, whenever the Dodgers and the Giants were in town, they always, the attendance was always like 49,000 at Shea Stadium.
Right.
For all the games.
Sure. That's right. Oh yeah. So how'd your cousin or Uncle Phil feel about Casey Stengel being the manager of the Mets? He was a Yankee.
He never. But you know what? He never really mentioned it that much. And I at the time, you know what it was also, when the Mets came into existence, he was still living in Brooklyn, and he didn't move to Queens till around '66. So it was like I would see him once a week, and we used to go to my he and my grandmother had a penny candy store in Brooklyn, so we used to go there once a week. So we didn't really discuss baseball. It was more about how much candy I can eat and how many egg creams I can make for myself.
That's life in New York. You went to Dartmouth, Peter.
Yes, I did.
Ivy League, and you played basketball, but Ivy League didn't give full rides on athletic abilities. So you went on your brains.
I didn't give any rides.
Yeah, right.
I never got into a game. Let's get this straight. I sat on the bench against Bill Bradley. I didn't play.
You didn't play.
I was a very good shooter, but I was 5'10". My defense was non-existent. But the coach Doggy Julian needed a 10th player for practice, so I was the 10th guy.
Are you just being modest, or?
No, I'm not. Let me tell you something. Our basketball team went 2-23.
Oh, okay.
It's a shame. We won 2 games by a point. We beat Holy Cross by a point. We beat Amherst by a point, which was a shame. Because if we had lost, we would have been 0. We'd have been 0-25, which would have been sort of a magnificent achievement in a very bizarre kind of a way.
Noteworthy in an academic world.
Yes, but when we played Bradley was truly the finest. He and Maravich, Pistol Pete Maravich, were the 2 finest basketball players, college basketball players, I ever sat in the same auditorium with and watched. I would go to Madison Square Garden and watch Maravich when he came to town when I got into law school. But playing at Dartmouth, Bradley was so fabulous that people came to watch him practice. He was just a magnificent, magnificent college player. And
right.
They beat us 104-64 and 93-33. That's how good that Princeton team was.
Wow. Memories of being humble. Sometimes it helps in life when you can look back and say, well, you got to start somewhere.
That Princeton team got to the Final Four. When Bradley was a senior, I was a sophomore. Bradley was a senior, and that team got to the Final Four. And then after I went to law school, I got to go to Madison Square Garden to see Bill Bradley's very first game when he played for the Knicks, and that was a real thrill too.
Remember that 12 points
against the Detroit Pistons.
I graduated
from. No, it was later than that. I graduated from college in '67. So it had to be 60, because he was a Rhodes Scholar, so he didn't immediately play basketball
right.
for the next.
Absolutely, he sat out a year or two, and
yeah, I started law school in fall of '67, so this was probably either fall of '67 or the winter of '68, somewhere in there, because he didn't start at the beginning of the Knicks season either. But I went to see his very first game because what a special player he was. He was just tremendous.
And it took him a while as a pro. They had him in the backcourt for a while, and it took him a while to find a niche on that Very,
yeah,
very
he was
deep
a little
New
slow,
York team.
a little slow to be a guard.
Right.
And then
What they called the
ended up
tweener in
with
those days.
Yeah. He ended up being a small forward with DeBusschere on the other side, Willis Reed in the middle, Clyde Frazier, and then they got the fella from Baltimore to fill out that team.
They had fallback Baby.
He was there.
And,
I'm not talking about Burnett. Who's the fellow they got?
Monroe. Monroe.
Oh yeah, Earl Monroe.
Earl Monroe.
That was to fill out that team, and that was just a stunning basketball team. The Knicks won, I think, in 70 and 73, and I was there for all of that. And the Knicks have never, ever been close to being that good since. And if you think about it, that's a long time ago.
It's a long time. Patrick Ewing, those days, was Chicago. In the early 90s, they came.
Well, they weren't going to beat Chicago.
No.
And
no, but there was some games.
They barely beat Chicago without Jordan. Remember, just with Scottie Pippen, they barely beat Chicago.
Yes. So this has been a wonderful first edition, Peter. I want to know a little bit before we go about what motivated you early on to get to the point where you were going to Dartmouth, you were going to law school, and it wasn't on your athletic ability. So what motivated you at home? What did you come from an academic family?
I came
from your mom,
a fairly academic family.
Okay.
No, it's just the whole milieu. I don't know what to tell you. It's just all the relatives. My sister ended up in law school. My brother's a doctor. I've got 3 cousins. Douglas is a doctor. Jeffrey's a lawyer. Susan's a lawyer. I mean, it's just the family we grew up in.
Okay, you're blessed.
I guess so. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's important. And I do want to ask you about growing up in Sanford, Connecticut. Did you ever run into Andy Robustelli? Was that a?
Yeah, all the time. Absolutely.
Tell me
a wonderful man.
He was my boy. He was my boyhood hero. He was, from a football standpoint, New York Giants. Tell me something about him.
These guys never made all that much money. So Andy Robustelli on Bedford Street, he had a travel agency. That's what he did in the off season in Stanford. He had a travel agency.
And
so he put his suit on and his tie on. He people would come in
and chat it up. And, yeah,
exactly.
Regular guy. You miss that? Do you miss growing up? Do you miss being there, or is it just I grew up there and I'm glad I'm gone? I mean, the weather notwithstanding, you're in Florida. There is a culture gap. I mean, there is from New York to California. I imagine what it must be like in Florida. Wayne has stuck it out all these years. Bless him. He fights the weather, and he's thinking about Florida down the road. But what do you miss most about New York?
I miss about New York, I'd say the people more than anything. I miss the institutions, the museums, Madison Square Garden, Yankee Stadium. I miss the pace of life there. I jaywalk like crazy around here because it's something I always did in New York. I can eat lunch in about 30 seconds. Because it's what I used to do in New York. You know what I'm saying?
Standing up, right, at the counter. But I have to tell you, we happen to live in the most beautiful city in the world, St. Petersburg, Florida. It's just a wonderful place to live. Oh, I thought you would
70 degrees today, play tennis this morning. This city is becoming very, very special.
Yeah, it's a city that my uncle spent the last 20 years of his life in. Died in the late 90s, and he'd bike ride. He'd just go from here to there bike riding.
Sure.
And you could do that. Nice place to live.
I have a softball game tomorrow morning at 9:30.
All right. Are you playing left field? Because I know your dream was for to be announced at Yankee Stadium playing left field after Mantle. What number would have you worn?
Center field.
Oh, you moved the Mick over because he was losing a step or two. Am I right?
No, I was going to replace him when he retired.
Oh, okay. In all of our dreams,
I was 13 years old. Yes, I was 13 years old. Michael Smith threw me a curveball. That's when I knew I was not going to replace Mickey Mantle.
Dropped off the table. If he hadn't been able to throw a curveball, you'd have gotten your pension by now. You'd have been your Major League pension.
Exactly right. Yep.
Exactly. Thank you, Peter. Let's keep doing it. And
you're welcome.
I enjoyed it, and it sounds like you did too. Thanks for sitting in, Wayne. You helped quell my nerves. I'm talking with the big guy this week, and
my pleasure.
It was fun. So out there,
Ralph,
I just want to
so
end
much.
the show.
Take care, Wayne.
I just want to end the show by
Go
telling
on,
everybody.
Peter. Nice meeting you.
A pleasure.
All right. Keep on keeping on, everybody. When things look a little bad, life has ups, downs, all that stuff. Please don't give up. And keep coming back. We do this on a regular basis now, and I'm very, very happy. Thanks, both of you. Over and out, guys.
All right, take care.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye. This has been a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.